We talked about this a few weeks ago on the program and the podcast, but it does bear repeating. And the reality is, or the concern is that we have, is that we're seeing these types of options get offered through courtesy of your employer plan. And the reality is, what we're finding is that investors are overpaying for underperforming advice inside their employer sponsored plan, whether that be your 401k, their 403b, or what have you, courtesy of the employer. And so we're going to tell a story on the program today to help sort of clarify and illuminate this issue, and hopefully give you an incentive to make sure that you're not falling into the same trap inside your own employer's retirement plan that they are offering, whether that's a 401k, a 403b, or a 401a. So welcome back to Dollars and Cents, where we help you make sense out of all of life's decisions involving your dollars. We're Central Florida's longest running radio program, coming to you on the News Radio WFLA Orlando network, along with 96.9 The Game. Also happen to be one of the top 25 financial planning podcasts on the World Wide Web. My name, of course, Joel Garris. I'm a certified financial planner, certified financial fiduciary with Nelson Financial Planning, where our team of certified financial fiduciaries stands ready this week to help you change your life with a successful and cost-effective financial plan that produces superior investment results and provides you with peace of mind for the future. So let's set the table with a story, a real story of someone who came in to the office this past week. And this has to do with a major employer in Central Florida, along with a major player in the employer provided retirement plan space. So big players, and this is not just some one-off story that is unique. These are major employers and major providers of retirement plans. And in this particular case, the employer was changing the provider. And that happens in today's world an awful lot, because employers are constantly sort of chasing for the lowest possible cost when it comes to the plan that they're going to offer for their employees. And the employer always wants to have their cost as low as possible, and then ultimately the employee in essence bears the costs. And it used to be back in the day where you would go and you would sit and do a big presentation to a company about the 401k and the funds that they would offer, and then you would even go so far as to sit down with each individual employee who's interested in signing up and kind of go through the options and talk to them a little bit, and actually have some one-on-one, in-person, personalized advice. And so back in the day, we used to do that as well. Our focus is not really on employee retirement plans as a business, but certainly from time to time we found ourselves doing that. But as you might imagine, there's an internal cost in that, and employers are looking to sort of strip away all of the internal costs and break them out so that they are separate costs. Somehow along the way, the financial industry has convinced the public that if you break out costs, that somehow that's better than if the costs are all internal. The problem is that that's a little deceiving, because in order then to get to your total cost as an investor, you have to add different pieces together. Well, most investors that we talk to don't even really look at their statements that much, let alone get to page 18 that gets into the details of the breakdown of the costs. And so what happens is you have this sort of splitting up, if you will, of the different costs that are happening inside of a employer plan, and really across the industry in general. And then people only hear certain pieces, right? So you might hear the piece about how much the advice is costing, but you don't hear the piece about how the investments have a higher, or just in general have a expense internal in them. And ultimately, to get your true cost, you've got to add those together. And no one really ever kind of explains it like that. But the reality is that a cost is a cost. Doesn't matter whether you refer to it as an expense or a fee or a separate management fee, it's still a cost. And so we're seeing that same thing happen on the employer side of things. And so employers looking for, kind of the lower cost, but then they also then are providing this advice, if you will, that they're building into these 401ks. And so they're basically looking for cheaper costs and less liability in their plans. And the problem is that means that investors are getting computer program driven type of advice that ultimately costs you directly and is overtly more conservative. So anyway, back to our story. So in this particular case, this employer plan was offering personalized planning and advice inside of the plan itself. Personalized, not based on a personal conversation, but rather you going online and kind of filling out your personal profile, and then from that, then they'll put together some type of a mix. The key concept that we have with that, and one of the things that we always struggle is when you complete a profile to determine what your investment mix is going to be, you know what's happening there. You're being told exactly what you want to hear. And folks, there's a difference between being told what you need to hear and what you want to hear. And that's the problem with profile or fill out this survey or answer these 10 questions when it comes to creating an investment allocation. Because you're going to fill that out based upon, what you want. But what you want, and ultimately the answer that you get when you sort of presuppose, here's what I want, it is going to be very different than what you need to hear. A 30-year-old investor may want to have no fluctuation in their account, in their retirement account, but at the end of the day, what they need to hear is, wait a minute, you're 30, you're not going to be able to really access this money until you're 59 and a half. So like 30 years from now, you shouldn't be going in a conservative manner in your investments, because ultimately that means you're not going to have enough money in retirement. So that's the difference between being told what you need to hear versus what you want to hear. And the problem with these computer-driven surveys and profiles and fill out this form is you get exactly what you want to hear. So that's problem number one. Problem number two is that these personalized advice and services inside of 401k platform come with a cost. In this particular case, it was about an additional 0.3%. So that's on top of the expenses of the funds themselves. There's one more catch on this, and you are automatically enrolled into it. You have to literally opt out. You have to do something, otherwise you're automatically into this sort of program costly type of approach when it comes to your retirement. Here's where it gets even worse. The advice is terrible. In this particular case, this person was being told to go 80% to bonds. That, folks, not going to get any type of return on that, particularly in low interest rates. So the wrong mix, not personalized at all, high cost, beware of that, and beware if your employer has that in your plan. We've seen a lot of people who didn't even realize that was part of the plan, but again, because they have auto-enroll features where you have to opt out, you wind up getting auto-enrolled, and it's costing you money, and you're getting terrible advice. As our ad says, don't overpay for underperforming advice. Unfortunately, that's happening in a lot of 401ks these days. So investors, beware on that when it comes to your employer plan.